Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I thought we would have a look at the Women's Prize for Fiction Longlist. So very excitingly last week the Longlist was announced. There are 16 books on the long list. The shortlist, which will be 6 books, is announced on the 26th of April, and then the winner will be announced on the 14th of June. So I think this is an interesting long list. There are some books on there which I think many people were expecting to see. There's a lot of books on this list that I have never heard of before. And there's quite a lot of debut authors as well, which is interesting. So what I've done is I've had a look at some information about all the books, looked at where the authors are from, looked at which of them are debut novels, and looked at sort of some a brief sort of blurb of the book. And I've tried to see which I can track down from my library. So my general plan when reading any book prize really is, if I can get it out of the library, I'll give it a go. The downside of the fact that a lot of these books I hadn't heard of before, I mean, presumably because they're slightly less well known, my library doesn't have a lot of them. They have about 8, I think, which is like obviously half the long list. So we'll go through and I'll tell you my sort of initial thoughts on each of these books, which ones I am looking forward to reading, which ones I am less looking forward to reading, and why. Anyway, we'll kick it off with Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. This is the one that I'm most excited to read. I love Sophie McIntosh. So her previous 2 novels, Blue Ticket, I really liked, and her debut, The Water Cure, I absolutely loved. That was a 5-star read for me. So I'm super excited to read Cursed Bread. It's only recently been published at the start of March, so my library has only just got this copy in. I was first in the queue. I picked it up this morning. So Sophie McIntosh is from Wales, and Cursed Bread is described as a feminist fable based on the true story of an unsolved mystery. So apparently it's about a baker's wife who sort of becomes enamoured by this new couple who arrives in the village. I'm hoping it's going to be kind of weird, and yes, super excited. I'm probably going to save this one for a couple of weeks' time so I can just have it sitting on my shelf and enjoy the anticipation of reading it. Next on the list, a book I had not heard of before, Children of Paradise by Camilla Grudova. So this is a debut novel, although the author has published short stories before, and this author is from Canada. So Children of Paradise is about a young woman who starts working at an old cinema called The Paradise, and apparently this cinema is full of secrets. This sounds very intriguing to me. I'm sad that my library does not have a copy of it. Out of all the ones I hadn't heard of before, Children of Paradise is the one that is most interesting to me. I mean, I'm not ruling out that I won't buy any of these, but I would need to be really, really interested in them to want to buy them. But that's the one at the moment that I'm sort of most interested in out of the ones that I can't get from the library. Next we have, this is a heavy book, The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. It feels heavier than it should because it's less than 500 pages. Yeah. But it feels really heavy. I really dislike this cover, by the way. Does anyone agree? I don't like the colour. I feel like it gives me a headache and it's too busy. I don't like it. Anyway, Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. Maggie O'Farrell is from Northern Ireland. So obviously she won a couple of years ago with Hamnet. I have not read Hamnet. I mean, I'm sure it's very good, but nothing anyone has said about it has made me feel compelled to pick it up. I mean, I guess I will do at some point. I think the only Maggie O'Farrell I've ever read, because I had to look this up before, is possibly one called After You'd Gone. I think that might be her debut because it's the first on this list. And I think I quite liked it, but I don't remember anything about it. So anyway, Marriage Portrait. It's historical fiction. It's about Lucrezia de Medici, who is learning to navigate the Florentine court, and and her mysterious new husband. So the blurb actually is more interesting than I was expecting it to be, because her husband apparently intends to kill her. I don't actually know the history of this. The blurb is a lot more intriguing than I was expecting this book to be. So I'm actually slightly looking forward to this one, because I was kind of dreading it, I'm not going to lie. this one out of all these books is probably going to be the first one I pick up. So we'll see. Next is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, who is from the US. Many people predicted Demon Copperhead to be on this long list. It is a reimagining of David Copperfield set in the modern times. I have not read David Copperfield. I'm not a big Dickens fan, although I've not tried that many of his work. But anyway, what I have heard a couple of people say who have read David Copperfield and then read Demon Copperhead is that they think that maybe you might have a better experience if you haven't read David Copperfield before, because if you've read David Copperfield, you know how things are going to play out. I don't know the story of David Copperfield. This is a very long book as well. So Demon Copperhead is one that I am sort of less keen to read. I will give it a go. My library has a copy. I haven't got it out yet because there's no queue for it. So I'll leave that for a few weeks once I've read some of the books that I have out at the moment. I've not read Barbara Kingsolver before. I do have a copy of the Poisonwood Bible up there somewhere that I picked up second hand, but I've not read it yet. Okay, next is Trespassers by Louise Kennedy, who is from Northern Ireland. This is a debut novel, but she has published short stories before. Trespassers is set in Belfast in the 1970s, and we follow a school teacher. And apparently it's about people sort of trying to live their normal lives amongst all this violence that is going on around them. I have ordered it from the library. I've ordered the paperback. I think the paperback must have either just been or about to be published. I don't know because it's on order from the library. But I'm not in a rush to read it, so I thought I'd just wait for the paperback. I've heard mixed things about this, but I will give it a go. Next is Pod by Laline Paul. So this author is London born of Indian heritage. So this kind of intrigues me, but I don't know if I'm going to hate it. It's about a dolphin, apparently, who leaves her family, and it's about a story of sort of survival and isolation. I don't know. I feel like this could go either way. I might hate this. I don't know. But I'll give it a go. Okay, I hadn't heard of that one before. Although that author is reasonably well known. I think she wrote a book called The Bees, apparently, which I have heard of, but I hadn't sort of connected it with the author. Next is The Bandit Queens by Perini Schroff, who is an author from the US. This is a debut novel. So The Bandit Queens is about a woman living in a remote village in India, and there are rumours circulating that she killed her husband. Apparently it's quite funny, which whenever a book is described as funny, it does kind of put me off. But yeah, sounds interesting. Again, had not heard of that one before. Next is Homesick by Jennifer Croft. The author is from the US, and Jennifer Croft also works as a translator and has won the International Booker as a translator in the past. So Homesick apparently is about two sisters growing up in Oklahoma. It sounds like a coming of age story. I'm kind of interested in this one. This novel has an interesting backstory. I think it was first published in Spanish, and then I think it was published in the US as a memoir, and now it's a novel. I don't know. Next is The Dog of the North by Elizabeth Mackenzie, who is from the US. This is another one that's described as funny, which puts me off. It's about a woman who has left her marriage and her job, and she's going on a road trip in a camper van. I'm not sure that on the face of it sounds like my kind of thing, but hey, my library does not have a copy, and it doesn't have a copy of Homesick. I can't remember if I said that. Next on the list is Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow. This author's from the US, and it's a debut novel. So Memphis apparently is about 3 generations of women. I did order this from the library when I saw it on the long list, because my library has a copy, and I had heard of this before, although I hadn't been tempted to pick it up. So I ordered it from the library, and then when I read a bit more about it and found out what the book was about. I think I read a review of it. It might have been like a Guardian review online. Found out some of the content and decided that actually I don't want to read this book. It's just content that I don't want to read. That's not a comment on the book itself, obviously, because I've not read it. But I'm unlikely to pick this book up. Since then, I've heard, and I had heard this before, but I hadn't connected it with this author, that this author apparently has sort of started arguments with some book reviewers, I think on Instagram, people who have given her book negative reviews, which I've not seen, so I guess that's not really my place to comment, but I'm going to. I think if you're an author, you've got to expect you're going to have negative reviews. Like, your book could win all the book prizes going, but you will still have some negative reviews. So that seems like a bit of an arty thing to do. But anyway. Next is Stoneblind by Natalie Haynes, who's an English author. Stoneblind is a reimagining of Medusa, apparently. Now, I would say I don't like Greek myth retellings, but to be honest, I don't think I've ever tried to read one. So how can I say that? It doesn't seem like my kind of thing. My library does have a copy of Stoneblind, and obviously it's a book I'd heard of before. Natalie Haynes is a very famous author. So Stoneblind is one that I'll probably leave sort of a bit later on, in terms of when I'm going to read it. I honestly don't know what I'm going to think of that. I feel like I'm not going to like it. Place your bets now as to how many of these I'm going to DNF. Last year there was quite a few DNFs from the long list. The next book is Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks, who is Jamaican British. It's a debut novel, although she has published short stories before. So Fire Rush is about a young woman in London. I think it's a bit of a coming of age story. Also parts of it are set in Jamaica. It sounds a bit gritty. I don't know. Kind of interested. My library does not have a copy, sadly. Next is Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin. This is a debut novel. Again, a lot of debuts on this list, which is really interesting. So the author grew up in Paris and New York and then moved to London. So Wandering Souls is about 3 siblings who flee Vietnam for Hong Kong. They end up in Thatcher's Britain. It's described as moving and heartbreaking. It does sound interesting. Although, sort of when a book's described as heartbreaking, I kind of puts me off a little bit, but I am kind of interested in that one, but my library does not have a copy. Next is Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris. This is a debut novel. The author is of Yugoslav and Cornish parentage and grew up in London. So it's set in Sarajevo in 1992, about a teacher who's working in a city under siege. Again, sounds quite gritty. Not sure if it necessarily sounds like something I would be drawn to, but you know, we'll see what the reviews are like when they start coming in. My library does not have a copy of that one. Next is one that I am quite interested in. I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, a debut novel, authors from England. It's about a toxic relationship. I think it's quite like a tight focus novel, but then it looks at sort of human interactions and social media. It does sound interesting. My library does not have a copy, sadly. And then finally on this list is Glory by Noviolet Bulawayo, who's from Zimbabwe, and this is set in a fictional African country about a tyrannical ruler. And the characters are animals. So obviously this is very well known because it was on the Booker last year. And I didn't read it at the time because my library didn't have a copy. My library does now have a copy. So I probably will pick it up at some point, but I'll, again, leave that probably for a few weeks' time till I've read some of these. So yeah, Glory, I feel like might be a bit of a Marmite book. I've heard very mixed things. It gets compared to Animal Farm, rightly or wrongly. I'm not really a fan of Animal Farm. I don't know how much of that is because of the whole animals as character thing. But, you know, we'll see. I will give Glory a go at some point because I am interested to see what I think of it. So that's the long list. Interesting, an awful lot of debuts. How many debuts is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that 8 debuts, I think? So half the list. So that's quite a lot, isn't it? Bit disappointed that my library doesn't have more of the books. I mean, I'll keep an eye out for them in case they get any more in, which is possible. Like with last year's Booker, they hardly had any of the books, but I have noticed now they have got some of them in, which is, you know, good but annoying that when you want to read them at the time. Anyway, early predictions. So my early prediction is, I think the one I'm going to like the most is Cursed Bread. And my early prediction for the winner, I mean, no surprises. I'm just going to say Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver because it just seems like a very women's prize book. It is very long, and I always think, this is probably not true, but I always imagine longer books are more likely to win because the judges have to read them several times. And I feel like maybe there's more to discover on rereading a bigger book. Although, of course, Piranesi won. Was that last year? Was that last year? No, year before. And Piranesi's very short, but last year's winner was a long book, Book of Form and Emptiness. So, hey. Anyway, that's my prediction. Do let me know any thoughts on these books. Which ones have you read? Which ones are you most excited to read? Are you going to be following the Women's Prize? It's a very exciting time of the year. So thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.